Hello, everyone, and welcome to Twillow Talk. I'm Tanis Coughlin from the Twillow Lifestyle Community, Twillow Lifestyle Academy, and I am joined by my beautiful co-host, Jennifer Jurkofsky. If I can get my directions settled.
Can't do the mirror screen. I cannot do it. I can be correct.
That's my problem too.
I just can't.
So welcome to our backwards day. I'm a Reiki master. I'm a Celtic Shamanic priestess. I'm a crystal master. I'm a channel. I'm a galactic ambassador. I do stuff. Jen, what do you do?
Same. I'm a registered psychotherapist, certified Canadian counselor, intuitive life coach, and I bring in energy healing and human design and all of that kind of fun stuff to do the stuff I do.
Just do the stuff. So I just want to say hello to a few people that are joining us. Hello, Gerald. Nice to see you. Thank you for joining us. And Maruda, thank you for coming on show. Thank you. Thank you. And Aries Dawn. Hello. Hello. Where are we? Here we go. Hello, Aries Dawn. Thank you for joining us. Always wonderful to have you all here. It is an interesting day today, energetically. So we had 2 X-class solar storms yesterday. So we have had this huge of energy that's come into the earth in the last 24 hours. I would like to ask for your patience for today because I do think that I'm having a little bit of connection issue on and off. So we're just going to cross our fingers and intend that everything's going to continue for us smoothly today for the show. But I'm asking for your patience in advance in case that does not happen for us. But we're intending everything is good. So yeah, so these solar storms, X class is like the highest. I think we've only had one that was higher a couple of months ago that came through. So it was an X, they were both X1s. We had an X2 before. So, but that's kind of like the highest you can get is in that range. So we had some pretty big energies coming in yesterday, and I think probably many people felt them. So what's going on in the transits for human design?
Well, it's interesting. So as of yesterday, we moved into the gate 39. So the gate 39, immediately, as soon as we talk about the shadow side of it, people go, oh, it's provocation, right? And so, it's really important to recognize that this is an energy that provokes us to action.
Right.
Okay. It's about having that energetic burst to create change, right? And to move from the emotional turmoil, the sadness, all of that kind of stuff that we experience into something else, right? It's a root gate. So it's a pressure center, a pressure gate, and it brings with it the pressure to find spirit, right? How do we move forward? How do we make this change? It's interesting. Richard Rudd talks about this idea. He explains it as like a cobra that's just waiting to strike, right? And its sole purpose is to provoke us, right? To really to make that push inside that we want to respond to.
Right.
So the biggest thing right now is paying attention to how you respond.
Yeah.
Right?
Definitely.
It's okay to be provoked and it's okay to be provocative. It's how we do it that matters, right? And when we pay attention to that, we move into the gift of dynamism, like that ability to kind of have that dynamic energy, right? And that leads to liberation. So just noticing if in the next, few days, you're having those moments where that, you're being provoked, you're feeling that kind of energy pull from you, and you really need to make change in some way, and take that breath like we do.
If Jacqueline were here, she'd be like, take that breath. Shoulders up and back.
Exactly. Oh, yes. Love Jeff.
Yeah. She's our yoga teacher friend.
Yeah. Find the pause. And don't just react to that provocation, but really allow space to go, okay, what can I do here? What kind of dynamic change can be had? How can we address this? Why am I being provoked? Why is this even bothering me? What's going on there? What can I change? What can I address?
Mm-hmm.
And that's where we find liberation.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of that coming up. I think the interesting thing for me is that I found some egos have come up this week. So I'm hoping we're kind of moving out of that. So there's some ego stuff. Like I've had a couple of interactions with people, and it's subtle. It's not like, in your face, but it's been like this little ego thing, and I've kind of gone, huh, that's interesting. Wonder why that's coming up for them. Of course it comes up for me too. But I didn't get drawn into it or anything. It was like more, it was really that silent observer, like, huh, interesting. Yeah. Interesting.
Well, and it's interesting.
So that's that provoking.
Yeah.
Thing.
Well, and I've noticed that too, even with myself. If I observe something in somebody else, my immediate thing is, what's going on with me?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Why am I seeing that? Why is that even showing up? Because there have been times where things have happened, and somebody, I remember doing actually a meeting, and I was in front of a whole bunch of people, and somebody was being they were provoking, or at least they were trying to provoke me and get a response out of me. I was oblivious to it.
Mm-hmm.
Like totally oblivious. And it wasn't until later that somebody said to me, you handled that so well, Jen. I said, handled what? Oh, when that person was doing this and that and all. Oh, I didn't even notice. Right? Because it wasn't even in my purview in that moment. Blessing upon blessings that it wasn't, right?
Yeah.
But again, when we notice something, it's important to kind of take that step back and go, okay, why is it showing up for me right now? Why is this person doing this? And why do I care? Right? Like, what's going on and what's,
Yeah.
But then letting their shit be their shit.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Noticing why why you're feeling it or you're noticing it. Right. Why are we noticing it? But then also like feeling into, is it something in you that you don't like that's being triggered? Or is it something that's happened before that's coming up for you that you're like, there's that pattern again.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to choose to feel differently about it this time, right? As we go forward. So I just want to say
choice.
Exactly.
I love
exactly.
That. Yeah, got a lot of highs.
Yeah. Hi, Warrior Girl. Thank you for joining us. Good to have you here. We have a message here from Aries Dawn, and I don't know if you can see that or not because I'm having connection issues right now.
I always need that reminder. Sometimes I find myself forgetting to breathe. It's it's one of those things that, I'll say to somebody, you need to breathe. They go, I am breathing. I'm like, it's not breathing. We gotta breathe.
You're not in labor.
Yeah.
Hello, Pogo. Thanks for joining us. Great to see you. And big hearts to you as well. Thanks for joining us. I still have a message on the screen, so I don't know whether you guys see it or not. Okay. Hopefully it's off. It doesn't show like it's on here, but it's kind of stuck on my screen. So yeah, it's going to be a fun night. Okay.
Trying to provoke you.
It is. Oh, there we go. Now we're back. Okay.
Liberation. Sorry.
There we go. Oh, it just gives me pause.
Yes.
So if I'm seeing dysfunction in technology, does that mean I'm worried that I'm dysfunctional? Hopefully not. If you responded, I did.
Dysfunction.
Yeah.
I love it. I don't know if anybody else got that, but that was like so perfectly timed dysfunction. It was brilliant.
Gerald says it's going to be fun with connection issues.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Yeah. That's it, right? Like we could get upset about it. We could be, you know, angry or mad or frustrated with it, or we could just laugh at it and enjoy it for being as ridiculous as it is.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Awesome. It's hysterical. It is.
Mm-hmm.
It is. It's fun.
Should we do a card before it gets too crazy?
I was just thinking that. Yeah.
I love it.
Oh, dear. All right. So as is our usual fashion, those of you that are new joining, we pick a card from the Soul's Journey deck from James Van Prague. And hello, Kylie. Thank you for joining us. Good to see you. We're having some connection issues, so please be patient with us. Yes, so as our usual, we pick a card because this is a beautiful deck of topics for us to choose from. And so, yes, it certainly has Vogo Pogo. It is definitely a technology week, as well as all sorts of other stuff. So, yes, so we will pick a topic and then we will have some lively conversations. Yes. Me too, Gerald. Me too. It'll be interesting. We'll see what they say. They're taking their time. Oh, that one. Oh, gosh.
It's the suspense. You always like, there's this moment when you look at the card and you have a reaction to it. And all of us, me included, because I don't know what it's going to be, we're all like on the edge of our seat going, okay, what is it? What's that response about? I don't know about you guys. That's how yeah, drum roll. Yeah, exactly.
Guilt.
Guilt. Woo!
I release any beliefs that no longer assist in my soul's growth. Look at that portal. Mm-hmm. Totally a portal card.
I love it.
Pulling us out of guilt, that portal.
Mm-hmm. Read it again. I release
any beliefs that no longer assist in my soul's growth.
I love that.
Yep.
I love that.
It's very it really draws you in. It's multidimensional, this card, so I just think that's pretty cool. Following that little spiral of energy. It feels like it goes both ways for me. It feels like it can go up or down, or not up or down, but in or out. You know what I mean? The spiral goes both ways. So like that's why I say it's like a portal. It feels like a portal. What do you guys think?
About this, like with clients so much, right? Is that we're always in motion. Yeah. We're always going one way or another, right? We don't generally stay stagnant.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And I think with guilt, it needs to be both ways. Right? We need to allow that release in many dimensions, in many different ways.
Yeah, definitely. So guilt can start small but ripple outward to other parts of life if we let it.
Mm-hmm.
And then release or chuck it out the window. Right here. Oh, I don't know if you guys see a change. Do you see it? There we go. Let's throw it out the portal, Gerald. Let's throw it out the portal.
My kids have taken to talking about defenestration. I'm going to defenestrate you. It's to throw out a window.
Fair.
So yes, to throw it right out the window.
If you stare at it long enough, it can be mesmerizing. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you know what? So can guilt.
Yeah, because we can really get drawn in to that
Yeah.
guilt.
And if we focus on it and we allow ourselves to continue with that vision of the guilt and everything else, we can be drawn in and we can be totally mesmerized by it, and it can take over.
Yeah. And it's really not being in the present moment when we're in guilt, right? We're really living in the past.
Yeah.
And we can't change the past, you know? So it's a little bit, it's an energy drain for sure, as
Yeah.
an emotion.
Yeah. Well, and guilt is such an interesting thing in that, you know, it's all the coulda, shouldas, right? But then it's also, you know, a lens that can dictate everything we do moving forward.
Yeah.
Right. So it's interesting because in the Gene Keys, when we talk about core wounds and stuff like that, it's based on our design Mars. The line that's there, line 5s, deal a lot with the guilt, right? That's that core wound piece. And what comes up is this need to understand the manipulation that power has, right, on our conscious and unconscious mind. And that's where guilt comes in, right? Is really recognizing that it's this power to try to control us that doesn't necessarily have a place for us.
Yeah. Gerald says the card draws us into the idea of release. In order to release, we have to fall through the guilt to allow us to release it. Yeah. Yeah.
It's so true, right? We talk about this when we talk about shadow work and everything else, is you can't do shadow work if you're not willing to look at the shadow.
Yeah.
If you're not willing to go
Yeah.
into it and see, you know, what is really coming up for me and what is, you know, holding me in this place, right? How can I embrace forgiveness of myself and others? Right? We talk so much about the Ho'oponopono, and I know you use it, you know, in your practice, as do I, right? And just the value that holding space for forgiveness, especially for ourselves,
Yeah, especially self-forgiveness for sure.
in our experience.
Yeah, definitely.
Right.
Kylie
And I
says, love it. Love
Ho'oponopono. Yeah,
Ho'oponopono. Yeah, for
it's
sure.
incredible. Right. And so
It
this
is.
idea of releasing beliefs that don't assist us in growth anymore, it's exactly that, right? It's being able to forgive that moment of, oh, when I did this. It's okay.
Yeah. We are human. You know, we're here to make mistakes. So all of you out there that have made mistakes and you're being hard on yourself, sorry, you need to toss that out because that's part of being human. Because we're here to experience all of those. So we're here to experience guilt, but we're not here to live in it. Because it's a valuable emotion. It tells us what we don't think we did a great job at, so we can change it for next time. But that's it.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, and it's interesting because some people have guilt as a motivation, right?
True.
And it's interesting because in that sense, it's not the guilt in the same way that we talk about it, right?
True.
Because it's this, you know, this need to kind of fulfill an obligation or maintain balance, right? It's a very different way of looking at guilt as well. So I think it is important to recognize that, you know, like all emotions, like all things out there, like you said, everything has its purpose.
Right.
And its way of allowing us to step into whatever it is we need to step into.
Yeah. Yeah. And a lot of time guilt is our own making something from a circumstance where there may not even be something there. That's the stories we're telling ourselves too. So we create that guilt in the stories. We were just talking about that, stories that we tell ourselves before we came on.
It's so
what story
true.
are you telling yourself in that? I'm like, What's wrong with my story?
Shut up, Jen. Go away. No, just teasing.
What's wrong with my story this time?
Nothing wrong with it. There is no right or wrong, but how
Exactly.
we narrate our lives determines how we feel.
Yes.
And I will say that over and over again because it is so true,
Mm-hmm.
right? And moving from that place of guilt, it can be really empowering,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's different than shame in that way, right?
Yeah.
Guilt is I did this thing and I don't feel very good about it. Shame is I'm a horrible person, right? Like
Yeah.
there is definitely a difference there. And so when we look at it from that aspect, we can see like, okay, guilt can be a huge motivator,
For change.
right? For change. I mean,
Big change
hello,
agent.
gate 39, provocation. Like,
There we go. You can't make this stuff up.
right? And so guilt can be a really provocative tool as long as we don't get lost in it.
Right. And as long as we can realize it. Like Aries Dawn says, sometimes people don't even realize they're carrying around so much guilt or how it's affecting their lives, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
It's true.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting because we talk about, decision making. And actually, like I was just on with Gerald earlier on his show talking about human design. And one of the things that we didn't really get to was authority. We kind of touched on it. But I know you and I have talked about authority too, right?
Yeah.
And if we let the narratives and the judgments and the beliefs that the mind has, which are all conditioned stuff, right, make all of the decisions, of course we're going to operate from a place of guilt sometimes.
Yeah.
Because it's going through those filters, right? But if we're able to recognize what our authority is and move from that place, then we can say, oh, yeah, okay, there's guilt. I see it. But I get to choose what I'm going to do with it,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that's a very different way of navigating it.
So I just heard something from the guides. They were like, so guilt is guilt is how you start to make decisions out of fear. And then it snowballs. So we feel guilt. And because we feel guilty, then we make a decision because we don't want to feel guilty again. So it's a fear decision.
Mm-hmm.
And
Interesting.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's important that we notice the why behind the situation, right? Because if we look at it, we can use guilt and it can come from fear for sure, right? But sometimes guilt is, that person said something and I snapped
Mm-hmm.
and it wasn't nice. And I really want to be more mindful of how I'm responding, especially when I know I'm tired, I didn't have a good night, things aren't going well today, right? And in that moment, guilt's not about fear, right? It's about recognizing that we have to do something different.
Well, that's where the fear is, though, right? Because we have to feel that fear. Like if that comes up again, I'm fearful. I don't want to make the same mistake.
So here's the question then. Can we have guilt without fear?
That's a good question. What do you guys think? Can we have guilt without fear?
Right? If we go down that rabbit hole of guilt, I think it can definitely lead to fear.
Yeah.
Right? But does guilt have to have fear with it?
I think so. Yeah, I think I agree with Aries Dawn. I do think so.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think that's why we feel it. That's why we feel guilt. Because we're fearful of something. Right? If not, we wouldn't feel guilt per se. We would, because oftentimes we feel guilty because there's a fear in place.
Mm-hmm.
Right? If we weren't afraid of abandonment, say, then we wouldn't feel guilty about doing something wrong with somebody. because we wouldn't worry about them judging us.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's what's
Okay.
coming through. I
And
don't
so
know.
what about guilt in personal development?
I'm not sure what the difference is, because I think that we would be doing personal development when we're thinking about guilt that way.
Yeah.
Right?
Because I think that we need to just be mindful that we don't immediately disregard the power of guilt. Right?
Oh, yeah. I'm not saying that we should disregard it. I'm just,
Yeah.
I think there's an element there that it's definitely related to fear in some way.
Mm-hmm.
So Maruda says, I think if you feel remorse, that's guilt, not necessarily fear for me.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. And it is a tough question, Gerald, because there isn't a right or wrong answer to it, right? It's really about bringing us back and kind of going, okay, what is my relationship with guilt? Right? And how do I, we talk about this, every time. It's like, whatever word comes up for us, how do we use that in our experience?
Right.
Right? And how do we use that to navigate coming home to ourselves?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so our relationship with guilt and how we explain it and how we define it really does indicate how we navigate it.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah. So Aries Dawn, I think sometimes it's not a fear, but a feeling, a sensitivity to others' feelings, not necessarily out of fear. Mm-hmm. Okay, but if you're sensitive to somebody else's feelings,
you don't necessarily have to be afraid that anything's going to happen. Right? Like, I think about this with my kids.
Depends what you mean by sensitive to, I guess.
Yeah. Like, I know that if I say something to them or I tell them to do something, that they're going to get mad at me. Right? I could fear that and not say anything and then have guilt because I didn't follow through as a mom. And that guilt and that fear are two completely different things.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
But the fear of not following through is still a fear of
but there's
not
no
being
fear
good
in
enough.
It's just a next time I'm going to really do that because I probably should have. It would have been better to say, you know what, it's okay if you're mad at me, go do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. You may fear discovery of your transgression, Maruda says. Yes.
Yeah.
I could see that.
Yeah.
Bogo, in both cases, remorse and sensitivity to others' feelings could still be fear of losing the person.
Yeah.
Or having a negative effect on the person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, I think we walk the fine line sometimes between shame and guilt in a lot of ways. And I love, Brene Brown does so much work with shame and guilt and the difference between the two.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that, taking the time to reflect on, again, how we narrate it, how we explain it to ourselves, it's all going to determine our relationship with it.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Maruda says you can fear the repercussions of your actions. For sure. Yeah, I think they're quite intermingled. Perhaps not quite the same thing, but they're quite they're intertwined in how we do things or how we live with it and through it.
Yeah. So when we think about guilt, right? Like, how does guilt show up for you? Like, is there ever a time where, you've been able to use that feeling that comes in to, push yourself forward, right? That provocative energy to really kind of propel yourself in the direction you want to go in.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I think that, when we feel guilty, then we know we want to change something. Mm-hmm. So that does provoke that change in response next time.
Yeah.
Right? Or you might choose to do something for the person to alleviate your own guilt in the situation, right? So to balance things in terms of that.
Yeah. And it's interesting because when we look at human design motivation guilt, again, in that sense, guilt is not a negative thing, right? It's very much about finding balance and perpetuating that ability for, moving forward and making change,
Mm-hmm.
right? And being able to, kind of challenge things and say, okay, you know what, like, how do we want to progress from here?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Maruda says guilt is regret of hurting someone.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the guilt also shows us a lot about our values
Yeah.
and our needs, right? And the things that we desire in our experience.
Yeah.
Right. And so, when we talk about that association with fear, that's a big part of it. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Recognizing like, okay, am I living in accordance with my values? Right.
It's true. Yeah. In accordance with your personal integrity, right?
Mm-hmm.
What's right for you. So, and Gerald says guilt has its purpose to help us understand how we want to be experienced in the world.
Yeah. Love that, Gerald.
Very nice.
Mm-hmm.
Nicely said.
Yeah.
Aries Dawn says, such an interesting question. This has turned out to be very insightful responses. Absolutely. We have some very insightful people on the
Awesome
call
conversation
today.
with all of you.
Absolutely. It's always a joy to have
Yeah, and
you
there's
on.
no, we talk about this and we can have differing opinions and all that. There's no right or wrong because it's all
No,
about our
exactly.
experience,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so it's such a beautiful thing because, again, like we can think about this and I could go, okay, I just challenged Tanis and Tanis is upset with me and now I feel guilty about it. Well, next time I'm not going to challenge that statement, right? Where if you say fear and then I'm saying it's not fear and whatever, right? Like I'm just explaining how I could go into that guilt cycle.
Oh,
Right?
I didn't even.
No, I'm not saying you were upset. I'm not I'm not indicating that you are or anything like that. I'm just saying that guilt can also be perceived, right? And
Yes.
so in that moment, I could have stepped into that guilt cycle and went, oh, okay, well, nobody else wants to say it's not about fear. I just, oh, I'm wrong with me. But again, like we can look at it and we can just go, okay, no, like I don't have to go down that narration. I don't have to allow myself to go there. And I use you, Tanis, all the time as an example. And I'm never saying that's how you're actually feeling. It's just
Oh, no. I was actually, what I was going to say was that wasn't showing up for me. Kind of like your example that you used earlier. How,
yeah.
when we don't see it, it hadn't
Mm-hmm.
even shown up for me. So I was like, oh, you challenged me? Wait, what?
No.
That's why my reaction was like, oh.
No. Yeah. Well, just saying like maybe it's not always associated, right? And asking what everybody thinks about it. But I,
Yeah.
like I think too, we have these different things that come up for us, right? And so, when I talked about like the line 5 and the guilt, we also have like, if we, let's say we have, rejection as our core wound, right? That doesn't mean that we don't experience that guilt, but maybe what we end up doing is we shut off because we don't want to have somebody else see us in a certain way, as Gerald was talking about. And then we
Mm-hmm.
feel bad about it. And then we think that there's something wrong with the way that we were doing, right? Like, so they're all interconnected and we're constantly weaving through all of these different experiences.
Exactly. Big hello to Twisted Sushi. Hello. Thank you for joining us. Our card today is guilt. For those of you that might just be joining us, that's our topic for today. It's become a lively discussion. Aries Dawn says it has broadened her perspective. Beautiful.
Wonderful.
Kylie says, and there is different types of guilt. So one is trauma-related guilt in people with PTSD as well. Yes, for sure. And Gerald says, that's why perception is important and understanding and valuing others' experiences. Their experiences are different than mine and equally important. Exactly. Yeah. And that's when, when I talk about personal integrity, it's about what's right for us. And we can't judge what's right for other people, right? So what I see as maybe being something I wouldn't like to do again, somebody else might see it as the right thing to do, and that's okay. It's
Definitely.
okay. That's why I liked your comment, Gerald, about how it's how we wish to show up in the world, right? How we want to show up in the world, because it is our choice about how we want to show up, and we do make that decision on a personal basis, and that's where the personal integrity comes from. So, somebody that might feel guilt about doing this specific thing, somebody else might do it and not feel guilty because it's within their integrity, right? And it is absolutely all about perception.
Yeah.
Kylie says she loved yours too. She loved the comment too. Absolutely. Thank you. That's great. So
Yeah. So how do we use guilt to move us? Right? How has guilt shown up in your experiences, and how do you use it? Right? How do you explore it? Right? We've talked so many times about emotions, and I've mentioned the roomie thing as, the guest house and all of that. Guilt shows up for you. How do you get the message?
Yeah.
What do you do?
How do you receive it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And Gerald has, in general, if I don't feel guilt about something, my behavior's okay. Impact on the other adds a complicating layer to it. Yes. Yeah. And then, there's also, if I'm following, so here's another layer. So when we're following our intuition and we do something and it affects the other person, but we followed our intuition and we know we were supposed to do that, do we feel guilty about it? Because for whatever reason, that person's meant to have that effect. Likely growth for them, but it doesn't mean that we necessarily feel good about it, even though we know that it was probably meant to happen.
Yeah.
Right?
And so in those moments, and I know I've had that kind of, with my partner, we talk about different things that come up for us and all of that. And, it's easy to go into guilt, right? And be like, oh, shit, I didn't mean to make you feel bad. Right. And at the same time, there's these times where it's like, but we've had the discussion and we know that we want to call each other out on certain things, even if it triggers both of us, because we want to grow and we want to do something different. Right. And we want to recognize the patterns that we're blind to, that we don't see for ourselves.
Yeah. Because we all have them, folks.
Yeah,
absolutely.
We
do. Every one of us has them.
We all do. Right. Yeah. And yet, if we then went into that guilt, we could say, I know it's hard. It's hard for me to actually say it because it's hard for me to see you get upset. And yet, we've had that conversation and vice versa, like, for him to me as well. And so in that sense, we can have guilt, but we know that it was correct. And we know that we would do it again. And we know that the person's still going to be there for us and that we're still going to be there for them. And it's all okay. And yet that guilt is still like, yeah, that's still heavy, but it's all okay.
Yeah. Well, and that's where that, that's sort of that unconditional love thing, knowing that it's okay. We don't have to be perfect. We are loved anyway, right? That's the whole thing. We are loved anyway.
And sometimes we feel guilt and there's no reason for it. Right? Like, yeah, there you go. Perfect statement, right?
Yeah. Up until now, it's been that internal bully. How I've disciplined myself. Hard thing to unlearn, for sure. And it's not necessarily that you need to unlearn it. I think that it's a redirection of sorts. Because like we're talking about, we can use that to create change in our lives, but it's about noticing it, making the change or make the intention or decision to change, and then letting it go as opposed to holding on to it. So it's not that having the guilt is wrong in any way. It's more about how we're going to move forward with it or releasing it.
Yeah. Well, and guilt is often a conditioned thing, right? Like you're saying in there, right? It's what you have to unlearn. And, this is where, again, that kind of authority piece comes into play. So, like a generator who responds to things gets an invitation to something, and they go, oh, I do not want to go to that. Right? That initial response is no, not going to happen. And then the mind gets in. Oh, but that person who invited you, they're really nice to you and they really want you to show up and they did it, right?
Yeah.
And it becomes this thing. And then the mind takes over, right? And that's where the guilt comes in too.
Right.
Because for so many reasons, that was a no for us. That's why we had that gut response, no.
Yeah.
Right? And so being able to recognize the machinations of the mind and how they are narrating that experience and what they're bringing up for us and what they're saying and how much of that doesn't even matter.
Yeah.
Right? There can be, it's a total freedom in that moment to be able to go, oh, I don't even have to go there.
Yeah.
Right?
It's true. Learning to trust our intuition and our connection to divine takes especially in the situations where we might be hurt by what we say. Perhaps it's all how we deliver the message, growth opportunity. Yeah, for sure. And there can be a lot of guilt when you haven't done anything wrong, but feel guilty because you're sensitive, considerate of others, and then you cannot be your authentic self, even when. But you feel it's the right thing to do for someone else's choices. Yeah.
Well, I mean, just throw empathy into the mix or clairsentience or any of those kind of things, and all of a sudden it's like, it's a whole other ballgame.
Yeah.
Right? Because you need to do it, and the other person's hurting, and you got to still follow through.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I think that in that sense, then exactly like, what you guys were just saying is in that part, guilt plays a role because it's not about the doing of it. It's about the how.
Yeah.
Right. And what does that mean? Right. And how do we show up?
Yeah. Indeed.
Yeah. It goes right back to, the start of the show when we were talking about transits and provocation. It's okay. It's okay to have these feelings come up. It's not about the feelings themselves. It's about how we navigate them.
Well, because we've talked lots of times about our feelings being guideposts, right? They're just messages. So how are we going to interpret our message? The message being guilt.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And there are times, like we'll have guilt and it's got nothing to do with anything that's actually going on. It really is all of our narration, right? Like I think about, the kids are off at summer break and they're like, Mom, come hang out. I'm like, I still have to work.
Yeah.
Right. And so I could allow myself to go into that guilt and be like, oh, but they really want to spend that time and I'm so horrible. And why can't I allow, like I should take this holiday now. And it's like, no, I have a plan for later. And I could allow that guilt to kind of come in and operate from that because I feel like I'm not meeting a need, but I know that I am meeting a need and I don't have to be there 24/7. And so I don't have to hold that guilt. But the only thing that switches or makes a change for me is the way I narrate it.
Right.
Right? The story we tell ourselves.
Yeah.
Becomes the story of our lives.
Indeed. So what story are you guys telling yourselves that's creating that guilt? Mm-hmm. What is that that's coming up for you? Apparently that's a heavy question for people because I just had my heart go.
Yeah, it felt really heavy, really
quick.
It did. And that's okay, right? One of the biggest things that, we talk about and I talk to clients about and all of that is, and I know you do too, is allowing yourself to sit in that heaviness.
Yeah.
It's okay to feel those things and it's okay to allow yourself to have those experiences. We're not going to be in them forever.
This too shall
Right.
pass. Emotions
Mhm.
pass. Right?
Yeah. And so if we can allow ourselves to sit there, if we can allow ourselves to see the shadow, if we can allow ourselves to, dive in, we can come back out.
Yeah. And, I think one of the really helpful things for me when I get in that depth is, okay, I have felt some version of this before, and I still felt other stuff after. Because you think you're never going to get out of that, right? You think you're never going to feel something different. But when we look at our history is the best the best indicator for future. Our history, we have been able to come out of that before. We have felt joy and love again, right? And so if that happens in the past, then okay, so I'm not going to get stuck in this because I've made it out of this before. So I'm going to stay here for a few minutes and then I'm going to move through it, right? And so that seems to be a good way for me to, this too shall pass, this too shall pass, right?
Yeah. But if you think about it, like exactly what you were just saying, this idea of, it's choice. If I let myself go into it and I choose to allow myself that experience, I can also choose when I'm done with that experience.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And that is such an empowering thing.
Mm-hmm. Indeed.
To be able to have, right? So this idea, bully and, worthiness and what that dynamic is. And if in that moment, you can follow that and kind of go, okay, why do I feel like I have to prove my worth? Right? What is going on there? Right? That I have to beat myself up in order to feel worthy. Yeah. Right? And then and allow that to kind of unfold for you, because in that moment there's so many different things that can come up. Am I comparing myself to others? Am I dealing with a history of trauma and being told I'm not enough? Am I dealing with dynamics that are really difficult for me? Am I dealing with my own insecurity around stuff? Like there's so many different things that could be coming up, and if we just bully ourselves through it, we're not going to get any of those messages.
Yeah, it's true. Big hello to Miss Moonlight Musing. Hello, hello. Thank you for joining us. And Gerald says, I would say there isn't an energetic connection problem for this topic. It's spot on. Awesome. Thank you. Oh, thank you, Gerald.
Aw, thanks.
And welcome to a deep and important discussion. Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes.
Work in progress. We all are.
So, Miss Moonlight Musing, we pick a card. We got guilt today. Guilt and shame. So guilt is what we're discussing and how that comes up for people. What stories we tell ourselves around that to create guilt or to alleviate guilt, depending.
Yeah. Yeah. And even the comment, Pogo Pogo, like work in progress, right? How many times have we guilted ourselves into,
work in progress.
I should be there already. Why haven't I figured this out yet? How many times do I have to do this before I finally get it?
As many times as it takes is the response. Some of us are slow learners.
Right? But again, this is where bringing in self-forgiveness, self-compassion, have some grace for yourself. Allow that space to be what it is. It's okay. We're not perfect. Tanis, you've got that line that we are perfectly
imperfect. Absolutely. Yeah.
Right? And it's such an important piece to embrace.
And the beauty in imperfection. I'm always drawn back to Gerald's raising his tiny hands up.
Mm-hmm.
It's a natural emotion. Yes, it is. It is.
Yes,
It's just a
exactly.
guidepost, right?
Exactly. Mm-hmm. And that's it. So when we explore our relationship with guilt, you know, if guilt shows up and we're like, no, go away, we're not getting the message.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, I'm always brought back to that, the story about how they fix, in Asia, they fix the china, the cracks with gold to make it more beautiful.
Yeah.
So the more cracks, the more beauty, the more worth it has.
Mm-hmm.
And that is us. The more cracks we have, the more mistakes we make, the more beautiful we can become.
Yeah. And there's that saying, I don't remember where it comes from. Maybe somebody else has the quote, but don't be afraid of the cracks. It's how the light gets through.
Exactly.
Right? It's in those moments where we go,
and we all do that.
that we have an opportunity to grow and to do something different and to allow space for progress in our experience.
Yeah, for sure we do, Miss Moonlight Musing. Absolutely. I think it's important to respect others' decisions. At the end of the day, we live with our own feeling and own them. Yep.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Yes, Pogo, for sure. We can't learn from perfect. We can't be perfect. Right?
No. Well, and I go back to this, like Rogers and Maslow and all of that, and we talk about like the self-actualizing person, and it's like the goal is to be self-actualizing person, not self-actualized person. It's not an ending thing.
Right. Not the end result,
right?
it's the journey, right?
It's about being able to journey, being able to be flexible, being able to pivot, being able to understand what's happening within ourselves. We're never without feelings. We're never without emotions. We're never without any of it. So we have to learn how to navigate it, right? And each time something new comes to us, we go, oh, that's interesting. Now what?
Where did that story come from? Yeah.
Yeah.
It's all in the experience.
Yeah. And if there is this guilt and this pressure to constantly be doing for others, showing up for others, and there is that fear response associated with it of they're going to leave me, I have to do it, right? It's worth exploring. Why does that matter?
Yeah.
What is going on for me? Why do I feel that, I have to act from that place of fear?
Well, and that
right?
brings me to, how I work when I work with my clients and we work with the Ho'oponopono, I use the root cause analysis, right? So when was the last time you were triggered? And we look at that, right? An example, somebody comes to me, they're triggered in traffic. Okay. Why were you triggered? Well, because I'm going to be late. Okay. Why does that matter? And we go 5 whys, right? Till the end. And it ends up being a fear, a base fear usually, right? In that particular one, it's abandonment. But, it's really asking ourselves, why does it matter to us? Why is this coming up for us? Why is this story playing in my head? Is this a story I really want to buy into anymore? Do I need to tell myself this story? Is it helping me be a better person, or is the negative aspect of that, like the guilt piece, impeding my progress with this story?
Yeah. Well, and we can look at it and go, okay, there's guilt. I can beat the crap out of myself about it, and I can, I'll do it better next time, and I'm so upset at it. Or we can just go, all right, well played. All right, I'll play that different next time. Okay, all good.
Yeah.
Right? Like it doesn't have to be, the guilt in and of itself doesn't have to be a negative thing.
Right.
Right? And so, as with any emotion, sadness, anger, fear, guilt, all of it, they serve a purpose. Right? It's how we relate to them It's how we take them in. It's how we let them leave.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And how we respond to the messages that they give us. That's what matters.
Yeah, for sure. So, our beautiful peeps in the audience, what are some of your final thoughts around guilt? Because we're coming to the end of the hour.
Holy moly.
I know. I just saw the time. I'm like, all right, let's ask for final thoughts. What are your final thoughts, Jen, around guilt?
Well, I just have to say, I appreciate all of you so much. And I know, Tanis and I both have said this. Having the conversations, having your insights, having a conversation like this, and having you all be open and vulnerable and sharing it and allowing us that space to, as they say, walk each other home. Yeah. Right? It is such a beautiful thing, and I'm very grateful to be a part of it.
Me too. I'm just super grateful for all of you coming and sharing in the energy and bringing your energy and allowing us to do this every week with you. And I think these are important conversations because they allow people to do that self-reflection. And, when we can support each other through those kinds of things, I think it really adds value to everyone when we can do that. So I really think that that's an important thing. So what have we got here?
I hear you.
Feel there could be an entire weekend workshop. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, definitely lots to discuss. For sure. An hour is a short amount of time when you start getting into these kind of topics. So maybe Jen and I will put something together around that.
Hey, who knows?
We could.
You could guilt us into this.
What story are you telling yourself, Jen?
Yeah.
Gerald says these are the beginnings of many conversations. Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely. Beautiful conversations. It's when we share insight and love through conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Guilt us into it.
I couldn't help taking the opening.
Oh, we're not here to create guilt. What story are you telling yourself?
No, but guilt is a beautiful motivator for change.
It is.
It really is.
So what do you want to change in your lives, right? What is the guilt coming up for you? What does that help you see?
Yeah, and how can you change your relationship with it and allow it to be a messenger?
That deserves the fan.
Oh, thank you. I need to get me a fan.
Hey, I have some new crowns. I'm just saying.
No.
For next time. Mm-hmm.
Very
mm-hmm.
cool. Very cool.
Aries Dawn says, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thanks to all in the chat as well. Enjoyed this. Awesome. Well, we loved having you. Thank you so much for coming. And so stay tuned. There's lots coming up this month with the Twillow Lifestyle Academy, Twillow Lifestyle Community. We have a holistic nutritionist and personal trainer joining us now, Nicole Coleman. So super excited about that. She's an expert in supplements as well. And she's just awesome. She's awesome. So I'm sure you'll love that. Love having her. We'll try and get her on the show or something. Well, it's our pleasure. Gerald, yes, thank you for being willing to continue these. It's our pleasure. This is, I know Jen and I would both see our role here as, passing on the light, as most of you are here to do as well, or you wouldn't be on the call with us. So, I thank you all for passing on the light. Thanks. Which one of us? I think actually both of us different ways. But yeah, so just, stay tuned for all the new stuff. We've got a channeling class coming up. We have our series as well, right? The Know Yourself series. It's coming up starting at the end of the month. Channeling class with me, spiritual communication starting up at the end of the month. We've got, what else have we got going on? There's a whole bunch. We got a crystal classes this month. So if you're interested in that, then that's great. Oh, thanks, Sylvia. Thanks for joining us. Enjoy that run-on sentence. So yes, so just stay tuned to twillowlifestyle.ca, and there's lots of stuff coming on there. Remember, we do have the membership page as well, and there's lots of lovely information on there. New stuff every month, and it's just a joy to share it with you. So thank you all again for joining us, and come back and see us again next week. Michelle and I will be on Wednesday as well, doing readings, 7 p.m. And we'll be back here next week. So looking forward to seeing you soon. Take care, everyone. Sending you all lots of love. Have an awesome week. We both do life coaching. We do spiritual coaching and life coaching. Yeah. Thank you all. Lots of love.